Rain stitched the interstate into a dark ribbon, each drop turning headlights into smeared halos. The road was mostly empty, except for a few semi-trucks that hissed past and threw up curtains of mist. Under the intermittent glow of street lamps, a charcoal gray 1969 Ford Mustang held the slow lane like it belonged there, steady at 55, unhurried, precise. Inside the Mustang, Jordan Banks sat upright with both hands set on the wheel, 10 and 2, not gripping hard, not loose either. The cabin smelled faintly of leather conditioner and cold rain sneaking in through the window crack. A Stanford hoodie clung to his shoulders, darkening at the seams where the damp had found it. His face was calm in a way that made most adults uncomfortable, like he had learned early that panic only feeds the wrong people. 300 yards back, half hidden in the median, a Dodge Charger patrol car watched through the rain. Officer Derek Holbrook lifted a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, took a sip, and grimaced. The brew tasted like burnt plastic. He didn't care. He cared about movement, about shapes, about anything that looked out of place. The Mustang slid past his position like a quiet dare. Derek leaned forward, squinting through the watery blur. 42, thick around the middle, buzz-cut clipped short against a hairline that was losing ground. His uniform sat on him like a promise he believed the world owed him. 2 months away from a review for sergeant, a promotion he felt had been overdue for years, he carried himself like a man who had been forced to wait too long for respect. "Nice ride," he muttered, watching the Mustang's clean lines carve through the rain. Then his eyes narrowed. Too nice. The thought came fast, rehearsed by years of bias wearing the mask of instinct. A classic car in weather like this, driven by someone who looked like a kid. It didn't fit the story Derek expected to see on this stretch of highway at this hour. He felt his jaw tighten, felt the familiar heat of certainty spread in his chest. Stolen, he decided, or drugs. Something. He set the cruiser into gear and rolled out of the median. Tires hissed. Wipers slapped faster. The red and blue lights stayed dark for one more beat while he closed the gap, savoring the moment of being the hunter. When he was close enough to own the Mustang's rearview mirror, he hit the lights. Blue and red fractured across raindrops on Jordan's rear glass, turning the world behind him into a pulsing aquarium. Jordan didn't jerk the wheel. He didn't brake hard. He signaled right with an unhurried click, eased onto the shoulder, and stopped beneath the glow of a street lamp that made the wet asphalt shine like oil. He turned off the engine. The Mustang settled with a soft, mechanical sigh. He rolled down the window. Cold rain air slid in, carrying the metallic smell of pavement and exhaust. Jordan placed his hands back on the wheel, visible, steady. Derek took his time getting out of the cruiser. He adjusted his belt, checked the position of his flashlight, and tapped his body camera with a casual flick, like a man brushing lint off his collar. He moved toward the Mustang with a strut that said the shoulder of the highway was his office and Jordan was already behind on rent. He raised the flashlight and aimed it straight into the side mirror, the beam bouncing into Jordan's eyes. "License and registration," Derek barked, before the window was even fully down. Jordan blinked against the harsh LED glare. His voice came out polite, controlled, too practiced to be fear. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my back right pocket. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for my license first. Is that okay?" The words were careful, the kind of response taught in safety videos and family talks. They were meant to reduce danger. To Derek, they sounded like a lecture. His nostrils flared. The rain tapped the Mustang's roof in quick, impatient fingers. "Just give me the ID," Derek snapped. Jordan moved slowly. His hoodie sleeve slid against the wheel as he reached back, retrieved his wallet, and offered the card. Derek snatched it, the plastic clicking against his glove. He flashed the light down to read the name, then swept it back up to Jordan's face as if comparing an entry in a file to a suspect's mugshot. "Jordan Banks," Derek read aloud, letting the name hang with a faint sneer. "You're a long way from the north side. What are you doing with a car like this?" "It's my car, sir," Jordan said evenly. "I restored it." Derek's mouth twisted. "You restored it," he repeated, as if repeating it would make it crack. "On a high school allowance." "I don't think so. Step out of the vehicle." Jordan's fingers tightened on the wheel, knuckles whitening just enough to show the effort of staying composed. "Officer, with all due respect, have I committed a traffic violation? I was going the speed limit. My tags are current, and my taillights are working. Derek leaned in. The smell of stale tobacco and old coffee rolled off him into the cabin, mixing with rain and leather. His flashlight beam wobbled, then steadied like a threat finding its target. I said, "Step out. I smell marijuana." The words landed with the casual certainty of something Derek had used 100 times. Phantom odor, a key that fit too many locks. Jordan's eyes didn't dart. He didn't plead. His voice stayed firm, controlled, almost clinical. "There is no marijuana in this car, officer. I don't smoke. I'm a student athlete. Out. Now." Derek's hand closed on the door handle. He yanked. The door swung open with a wet creak, letting rain speckle the seat and Jordan's jeans. Jordan unbuckled slowly. He knew how quickly a moment could turn fatal if he moved wrong. He stepped out into the rain, and cold water soaked through his hoodie immediately, clinging to his back like a second skin. Derek spun him and shoved him against the Mustang's pristine paint. The impact thudded through metal. Jordan's breath hitched. "Hey," Jordan blurted, the first crack in his composure. "Careful with the car." "Stop resisting," Derek shouted, loud enough for the cruiser's dash cam to catch, loud enough to write his own narrative over reality. He kicked Jordan's legs apart, patted him down hard, searching with the desperation of a man who needed to be right. His hands found a phone. A pack of gum. Nothing else. Derek dragged Jordan back upright, crowding into his space until Jordan could smell the sour edge of coffee on his breath. "Where is it?" Derek growled. "Where's the stash? You toss it before I lit you up." "There is no stash," Jordan said, meeting Derek's stare head-on. Rain ran down his cheeks like tears he refused to own. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. This is an unlawful search. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle." For a beat, the only sound was rain and the distant rush of tires on wet asphalt. Derek looked at him. 17, soaked, handcuffed, quoting the Constitution like it was a shield that could stop a man who believed he was the weapon. Then Derek threw his head back and laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound that bounced off the concrete sound barrier and came back sharper, meaner. The dashcam's tiny red light blinked in the cruiser like an unblinking eye. "Your rights," Derek wheezed, wiping rain from his brow. "Kid, you're on the side of the interstate in the dark. You don't have rights. You have me." Jordan's jaw tightened. His voice dropped, quiet but clear. "You're making a mistake. A massive mistake." Derek shoved him toward the cruiser, the cuffs biting Jordan's wrists with each jolt. "Yeah, sure," Derek said, still grinning. "Get in. We'll sort out your rights downtown." As Jordan ducked into the back seat, plastic cold against his thighs, he looked through the metal cage at Derek's reflection in the rearview mirror. "Officer Holbrook," Jordan said, reading the nameplate through rain streaks. "Badge 492. Derek's grin widened, pride flaring like the lights outside. "That's me," he said. "Don't forget it." Jordan's eyes stayed steady, recording, filing, holding. "I won't," he said, and the cruiser door slammed shut with a final hollow thud that sounded like a lock turning. The cruiser's back seat smelled like disinfectant and old sweat, a chemical attempt at cleanliness that never fully erased what had happened in it. Jordan sat upright behind the metal cage, wrists cuffed in front, the steel biting colder as the heater blasted. Derek drove like the road belonged to him, accelerating hard, taking corners fast enough to slide Jordan's shoulder into the door with a dull plastic knock. Heavy metal punched from the radio, bass vibrating through the frame. Jordan didn't speak. His breathing stayed measured, controlled, almost silent under the music. Rainwater dripped from his hoodie hem onto the floor mat in slow, patient drops. Each one felt like a second being counted. The 4th Precinct's Sallyport door rattled up and swallowed the cruiser into fluorescent glare. The rain noise died behind concrete. Inside, the air was warm and stale, heavy with floor wax and burnt coffee. Derek yanked open the back door and hauled Jordan out by the arm with practiced impatience. "End of the line," Derek said, voice bright with ownership. Jordan's shoes squeaked on the wet concrete as he was pushed toward the booking desk. The lights above buzzed with a thin electric whine that made the room feel too sharp, too awake. A tired desk sergeant looked up from a computer monitor that washed his face in pale blue. "What do we have, Derek?" Sergeant Thomas Miller asked, his tone already braced for a headache. "Possession," Derek said, feeding the word like bait. Resisting. Disorderly. Kid got mouthy. Started quoting amendments. Miller's eyes moved over Jordan in quick, careful checks. Damp Stanford hoodie. Clean hands. No smell of smoke. No frantic energy. Just a stillness that didn't fit the charges Derek liked to announce. You find anything on him? Miller asked, not looking at Derek yet. Derek hesitated for a fraction of a second that he tried to cover with a snort. Probably ditched it. I'm impounding the car. We'll tear it apart. We'll find residue. Jordan's voice cut through the room, calm but carrying in the tile and metal. Sergeant Miller, I would like to state that Officer Holbrook found no contraband because there is none. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. I am requesting counsel. Derek slammed his palm on the counter. The sound cracked through the room like a slap. Shut up, he snapped. You speak when spoken to. Miller lifted a hand. Slow, a small gesture meant to reduce damage. Easy. We're processing him. His eyes stayed on Jordan. Name. Date of birth. Jordan answered without fumbling, as if reading from a page he had memorized for this exact moment. Miller typed, the keys clicking fast. When Jordan gave the address, Miller's fingers paused above the keyboard. His eyebrows rose, then tightened. He looked up at Derek, and for the first time, Derek's swagger met something that wasn't fear or compliance. You sure about this? Miller asked quietly. Derek's jaw clenched. Book him! The word came out harsher than necessary. Miller's gaze flicked to the damp hoodie again, to the bruising on Jordan's wrists that was beginning to bloom red against pale skin. Then back to Derek, like he was trying to decide whether to step in front of a moving vehicle. Miller returned to the keyboard, the screen reflecting in his eyes. Paperwork printed with a mechanical whir. A fingerprint scanner beeped. Jordan's fingers pressed down one by one, inkless and clean. The camera flash popped for the mugshot, harsh white that made his wet hair shine. Through it all, Jordan stayed eerily steady, like his body was operating on a script while his mind recorded details for later. The angle of the camera, the time display above the desk, the way Derek's belt buckle caught the light when he leaned. Finally, Miller led him toward a holding cell. The corridor smelled like bleach and old metal. The gate buzzed and opened with a tired groan. One call, Miller said, handing him the precinct phone. Keep it brief. Derek leaned against the wall a few feet away, coffee in hand again, watching like he was waiting for a show. The corner of his mouth curled with anticipation. Jordan lifted the receiver. The plastic felt warm from someone else's hand, then cold where his fingers touched it. He didn't look down at the keypad. He dialed from memory, numbers tapping out in clean, deliberate clicks. The line rang twice. A deep voice answered, steady and unhurried. Jordan. Jordan's shoulders lowered a fraction at the sound, relief arriving late and sharp. Dad, I'm at the 4th precinct on 5th Street. I've been arrested. A silence came through the receiver. It wasn't shock. It was focus. Are you hurt? The voice asked, the tone dropping into something colder. Minor bruising, Jordan said, eyes staying on Derek. Nothing broken, but he laughed. The word hung between them, heavier than the charges. Who laughed? The voice asked. Officer Derek Holbrook, Jordan said, each syllable placed carefully. Badge 492. He claimed he smelled marijuana. He slammed me against the Mustang. When I cited the 4th Amendment, he laughed. Derek's grin faltered, not because he heard the words, but because of the way Jordan spoke them, like a report delivered up a chain of command. Jordan's gaze didn't waver. Is the officer there right now? The voice asked. Yes, Jordan said. Standing about 5 feet away, drinking coffee. Put him on. Jordan held the phone out through the bars, arm steady. He wants to speak with you. Derek scoffed, pushing off the wall. He took the receiver like he was taking back control. Listen here, Mr. Banks. Your son is in serious trouble. He's facing... The voice on the other end cut through the line, sharp and absolute. This is Carter Banks. The change in Derek's face was immediate, like a switch thrown in a dark room. The color drained from his cheeks. The coffee cup dipped slightly, forgotten in his hand. For a beat, even the fluorescent buzz seemed louder. Jordan watched the moment land, watched Derek swallow once, hard. Mr. Banks, Derek began, voice thinner now. Look, your son was driving suspiciously. Stop talking, Carter said, each word flat and controlled. Every word you speak from this moment forward is a nail in your professional coffin. Derek's eyes flicked to the body camera on his chest. The red indicator blinked steadily, indifferent. I'm going to ask you one question, Carter continued. Is your body camera footage intact? Derek's mouth opened, closed. He nodded without realizing it, then forced his voice to work. Yes? Good, Carter said. Do not turn it off. Do not edit it. Do not lose it. I am 20 minutes away. Derek's grip tightened on the receiver until his knuckles whitened. And Officer Holbrook, Carter added, the calm turning sharper. If a single hair on my son's head is out of place when I arrive, I won't just sue you. I will dismantle your precinct brick by brick. The line went dead. For a moment, Derek held the phone as if sound might return, as if he could rewind the last 10 seconds and choose a different life. The room felt too still. Somewhere behind the desk, a printer spit out another page with a dry mechanical cough. Miller stared at Derek, eyes wide, face gone pale. His lips parted, but the words came out as a whisper, like saying them louder would make them real. Derek, he said, tell me you didn't just arrest Carter Banks's son. Derek turned slowly toward the holding cell. Jordan sat on the metal bench, cuffs resting in his lap, hands folded with a patience that looked almost ritual. Water dripped from his hoodie onto the concrete, steady and soft. Jordan looked up. For the first time tonight, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't victorious. It was simply certain. You should probably call your union rep, he said quietly. You're going to need him. The phone in Derek's hand slipped just a fraction, plastic creaking under his grip, and the small red light on his chest camera kept blinking, counting down the 20 minutes he could no longer control. The moment the receiver hit the cradle, the precinct felt different, as if the building itself had inhaled and decided not to exhale. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum with a sharper edge. The air, thick with wax and coffee, turned metallic. Sergeant Miller moved first. He slipped behind the desk and began typing like his fingers were trying to outrun consequences. Keys clacked in frantic bursts, then slowed into deliberate sequences. His shoulders stayed rigid, jaw clenched. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to the digital clock above the booking area, as if it had become a judge. Jordan sat on the bench inside the holding cell, wrists still cuffed, hands resting in his lap. Water pooled beneath his shoes in a dark oval and spread in thin veins toward the drain. He stared at nothing in particular, but his gaze never unfocused. He looked like someone who had already stepped into survival mode and refused to leave it. Derek tried to keep moving, because standing still felt like being trapped in a spotlight. He paced the short strip of tile between the desk and the wall. His boots squeaked with each turn. He crushed his styrofoam coffee cup with one hand and tossed it toward the trash. It hit the rim, bounced, and rolled onto the floor. The small failure made heat rise in his throat. He's bluffing, Derek muttered, more to himself than anyone. He forced a laugh that didn't land. He's a lawyer. That's what they do. Miller didn't look up. Carter Banks doesn't bluff, he said, voice tight. He doesn't need to. Derek stopped pacing long enough to drag a hand over his buzz cut. His scalp felt cold and slick under his palm. I had probable cause, he said louder now, as if volume could turn a story into fact. The smell was there. The kid was resisting. Miller's fingers paused on the keyboard. He finally looked over his glasses, eyes tired and flat. It's your word against his, he said. Then he corrected himself without blinking. It's your word against the videos, and against Carter Banks. The word videos made Derek's gaze snap to his chest. The body camera's red light blinked steadily. He lifted his hand, hovering near it like he wanted to smother the light with his palm. His fingers didn't touch. Touching it felt like leaving fingerprints on a weapon. Behind bars, Jordan shifted his wrists slightly. The cuffs scraped metal on metal, a thin sound that cut through the room. He didn't speak, but the movement was enough to remind Derek that the kid was still here, still watching, still recording in a way cameras couldn't show. Miller returned to typing, his screen filled with lines of text, charges, booking times, intake notes. He added details with careful precision, the kind that created an alibi for anyone near the blast radius. He printed 2 copies, signed one, filed the other. Each paper slid into place with a soft slap that sounded like a lid closing. Derek resumed pacing, faster now. His jaw worked as if chewing something bitter. "People say his name like he's a ghost," he snapped. "He's just a guy in a suit." Miller's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I watched him cross-examine a homicide detective once," he said. The detective walked in confident. He walked out stuttering. Banks didn't just win the case. He made the department wish they'd never met him. Derek's breath came a little louder through his nose. The idea that someone could take his badge, his authority, and turn it into a liability made his chest feel too tight. He glanced at Jordan. The teen sat with his back straight, eyes half-lidded as if conserving energy. A bruise was blooming along his wrist, purple rising under skin like ink in water. Derek looked away first. Miller reached for the desk phone, then stopped. His hand hovered, uncertain. Calling the captain meant waking a man who would ask questions Derek didn't want to answer. Not calling meant letting the 20 minutes run out with no net. The clock clicked over a minute. The digits changed with a clean electronic snap. Miller picked up the phone and dialed. The ringing sounded too loud in the quiet room. He spoke low when the line connected, keeping his face turned away from Derek as if discretion could protect him. "Captain," he said, "sorry to wake you. We have a problem. A big one." Derek listened, pretending he wasn't. His eyes traced the room like he was searching for exits. The booking camera in the corner stared down, black glass reflecting nothing. The printer whirred again. The holding cell buzzer clicked once, idle, like a tooth tapping. Miller's voice stayed clipped. "Yes, sir. Carter Banks. He's on his way. He's already demanding preservation." A pause. "No contraband recovered?" "Yes, the kid's calm. Too calm." Miller hung up. He didn't immediately look at Derek. When he finally did, his expression held a warning without softness. "He's coming," Miller said, "and he'll want the footage. Both cameras." Derek's throat moved as he swallowed. "We're fine," he insisted. "I didn't do anything wrong." Miller's eyes dropped briefly to Derek's body camera light. Blink, blink, blink. "Then you've got nothing to worry about," Miller said, and the tone made it feel like a verdict. Derek's hands flexed at his sides. He felt sweat gathering under his collar despite the station's stale air conditioning. He wanted to talk, to fill the silence, to rewrite reality in real time. Every time he opened his mouth, he heard Carter's voice in his head. "Stop talking." He closed his mouth. The next minutes stretched thin and sharp. Miller kept working the keyboard, adding timestamps, tightening the digital trail. He pulled up the upload system, cursor hovering over the camera file directory. He checked the storage status, then checked again. His movements were precise, small, controlled. A man building sandbags before the flood arrives. Derek sat for a second in a plastic chair near the wall, then stood again. Sitting made him feel trapped. He walked to the coffee pot, poured a fresh cup, and didn't drink it. The steam rose and vanished. From the cell, Jordan shifted his shoulder against the cold concrete and closed his eyes, just for a breath. His lips moved once without sound, like counting. When his eyes opened again, they were clear. A faint tremor passed through the front doors as someone entered the lobby area beyond the booking room. The outer doors hadn't opened yet, but the building sounded different, like footsteps approaching from a distance in a quiet hallway. Miller glanced at the clock. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then pressed one final key. A file upload bar appeared on his monitor, filling slowly, green crawling forward like time. Derek stared at that bar as if willing it to stop. The precinct's glass double doors remained closed, but the silence between blinks on Derek's camera felt shorter now, tighter, as if the building had started counting down out loud. Jordan's voice came soft from behind the bars, not taunting, not loud, just factual, in a way that made Derek's spine stiffen. "He told you not to talk," Jordan said. Derek didn't answer. Miller's upload bar advanced another inch, and somewhere outside, tires hissed on wet pavement as a vehicle slowed, then stopped, perfectly on time. The glass double doors swung inward with controlled weight, not slammed, not rushed. Cold air rolled in from outside, carrying the clean bite of rain and wet asphalt. A black umbrella shook once in the entryway, precise, and folded like a tool being put away. Carter Banks stepped into the precinct as if he had an appointment and everyone else was late. He was tall, shoulders squared beneath a charcoal wool trench coat that shed water in clean lines. The fluorescent lights caught the fabric and made it look expensive without trying. His tie sat perfectly centered, his collar crisp, his shoes spotless despite the weather. He didn't scan the room the way most people did when they walked into a police station at midnight. He didn't look for danger. He looked for procedure. His eyes landed on the booking desk. Sergeant Miller stood without thinking, chair legs scraping the tile with a harsh squeal. The sound hung too long. Miller's mouth opened, then closed, then tried again, like his body was choosing respect before his brain caught up. "Mr. Banks," Miller said. Carter didn't waste a nod on Derek. He moved straight to the desk, footsteps steady, each heel strike a quiet hammer. The station's buzzing lights seemed to dim around him, not physically, but socially, as if everyone in the room had stepped back an inch. "I am here for my son, Jordan Banks," Carter said. His voice was low, controlled, not loud, yet it filled the space. "I am also his counsel." Miller swallowed. His fingers hovered near the keyboard as if he might type his way out. "Yes, sir. He's processed," Miller said quickly. "We were finishing paperwork. We can release him on his own recognizance, given his record and community ties." Carter's gaze stayed on Miller's face, unblinking, as if measuring whether the words were true. "Good," he said, and the single syllable landed like a stamp. Then Carter turned. Derek had been standing near the wall, trying to arrange his posture into confidence. His hand hovered too close to his belt, instinctively reaching for the authority that had always answered for him. The moment Carter faced him, Derek felt the room tighten around his own breathing. "Officer Holbrook," Carter said, tasting the name like something burned. His eyes moved over Derek the way an examiner moved over an object. Nameplate, badge number, body camera, boots. The blink of the camera light reflected in Carter's pupils. Derek lifted his chin. "Mr. Banks," he said, forcing a tone that tried to sound official. "I'm the arresting officer. Your son was driving suspiciously. Rainy night, moving slow." "He was driving carefully," Carter cut in, voice still calm. "At a speed consistent with safety. Your report will say otherwise. It always does." Derek's jaw tightened. I detected a strong odor of burnt marijuana. Carter held Derek's gaze for one long beat, then spoke as if reading from a file already open on his desk. "My son has severe asthma," he said. "He has never smoked. Smoke triggers immediate bronchial spasm. If he had been smoking, Officer Holbrook, he wouldn't be driving. He'd be wheezing." Derek blinked, the first real crack. "Maybe someone else smoked in the car," he tried. "It's an old vehicle. Smells linger." "The interior is new," Carter said, and his tone didn't change, which made it worse. He restored it himself. Leather-treated, panels replaced, no residue to hide behind. Derek shifted his weight. The tile squeaked under his boot. Carter took a half-step closer, not aggressive, just inevitable. Derek smelled rain on wool and something faintly clean, like soap or cold air. It didn't smell like fear. It smelled like control. Jordan's voice came from the holding cell, quiet but present. "Dad?" Miller moved fast, almost jogging, pressing the buzzer. The metal door clicked open with a dry sound. Jordan walked out, hoodie still damp and wrinkled, wrists cuffed, posture straight. The fluorescent light bleached the color from his face, but his eyes stayed sharp. Carter's expression shifted the slightest degree when he saw him stone softening into something protective without becoming weak. He placed both hands on Jordan's shoulders, checking him the way a surgeon checked a patient. "Turn around," Carter said, voice softer but still firm. Jordan turned. Carter lifted the back of the hoodie, revealing dirt smeared across Jordan's shirt where he'd been pressed into the Mustang. Carter's jaw tightened. He guided Jordan's hands forward and inspected the wrists. The skin was reddened, swelling unevenly where the cuffs had bitten. Carter pulled out a smartphone. The case was sleek, matte black. He raised it and took photos, close and careful, each click sharp in the room. Wrist, other wrist, dirt on the back. Jordan's face, eyes clear, pupils normal. Each photo was a small act of preservation. Derek stepped forward, anger flaring as a defense. "Hey, you can't take pictures in here." Carter didn't flinch. He lowered the phone just enough to look Derek directly in the eyes. "This is evidence preservation," he said, "unless you'd like to provide booking photographs right now. With timestamps, with a chain of custody." Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Then step back," Carter said, and the room obeyed before Derek's pride could argue. Carter slid the phone away and turned to Jordan. "Are you ready to go?" Jordan nodded once. "Yes, sir." "My car," Jordan added, and the words came out tight. Not because of the vehicle, but because it was the one thing Derek had touched that felt like home. Derek couldn't resist. He leaned in with a smirk that didn't match his eyes. "Impounded," he said, "pending a search. K9 comes in the morning." Carter looked at Derek as if he'd said something childish at a funeral. "You're going to have a dog scratch a fully restored 1969 Mustang," Carter said, voice still quiet. "You better hope it finds the lost city of Atlantis in that trunk, Officer Holbrook, because if it comes up empty, you'll be personally liable for every mark." Derek's smirk slipped, sliding off his face like wet paint. Carter guided Jordan toward the door. Jordan's wet sneakers squeaked on the tile. The precinct's air felt heavier near the exit, like it wanted to hold them there. At the threshold, Carter stopped and spoke without turning around, addressing Miller like a man issuing a checklist. "Sergeant Miller." Miller straightened. "Yes, sir." "Ensure the dash camera footage and the body camera footage are uploaded to the secure server within the hour," Carter said. His voice was even, but every word was a nail. "I will file an emergency motion for preservation of evidence by 8 in the morning." Miller's fingers twitched, already thinking in menus and folders. "Understood." "And Sergeant," Carter added, pausing just long enough for the room to lean in, "if a single second of that video is corrupted, missing, or accidentally deleted, I will request federal involvement. You will not enjoy that process." Miller's face went paler. "Yes, sir." Carter opened the door. Rain hissed outside like static. Jordan stepped into it, shoulders pulling up against the cold. Carter followed, trench coat catching the porch light in a clean sheen. Before the door shut, Carter finally glanced back once. Not at Miller, not at the room, but at Derek. The look wasn't anger. It was assessment, like confirming the measurements of something about to be dismantled. The doors closed with a heavy, final thunk. Inside, the fluorescent buzz seemed louder. Derek stood frozen in the center of the booking area, hands flexing at his sides, the red light on his chest, camera blinking like a heartbeat he couldn't slow. Miller was already reaching for the phone, voice tight as wire. "Captain," he said the moment the line picked up, "we have a problem." Derek stared at the closed doors, feeling the space where his grin used to live. His mouth tasted like burnt coffee. The room smelled like wax and inevitability, and somewhere beyond the precinct walls the rain kept falling, washing nothing away. The report room sat at the back of the precinct, like a confession booth built from cinder block. No windows, only a strip of fluorescent light that flickered faintly at the edges. The air was dry and warm, smelling of toner, old paper, and the faint sourness of reheated coffee. Derek Holbrook sat at a metal desk with a computer monitor glowing an accusing white. The cursor blinked on an empty narrative field, patient as a metronome. He had written thousands of reports in this room. He knew the rhythm. He knew which words opened doors and which words closed them. Outside the thin wall, the precinct was moving faster than it had an hour ago. Phones rang. Footsteps passed and didn't stop. A printer somewhere coughed out paper with urgent little shutters. Nobody came in to chat. Nobody asked if he was okay. The silence around Derek wasn't calm. It was avoidance. He cracked his knuckles, forced breath into his lungs, and began to type. Subject: Arrest of Jordan Banks. Incident time 23:15. Officer D. Holbrook. Badge 492. His fingers moved with practiced speed, building the story the way he always did, brick by brick, using phrases that had saved him before. Officer observed a gray vehicle traveling at a slow rate of speed in the far right lane, drifting within the lane, violation of lane control. He paused, jaw working. He hadn't seen the car drift. The rain had been heavy, the darkness thick, but drifting was the cleanest key in his pocket. It justified suspicion. It made the stop feel necessary. He typed the next line harder, as if pressure could make it true. Upon approaching the vehicle, officer detected a strong odor of burnt marijuana emanating from the cabin. He stared at the sentence. The words sat there with clinical confidence. No camera could argue with smell. He exhaled through his nose and continued. Driver appeared nervous, dilated pupils, sweating profusely. He pictured Jordan's eyes in the street lamp glow, steady and unflinching. Derek's fingers kept moving anyway. Driver was non-compliant with verbal commands to exit the vehicle. Driver made a furtive movement toward the center console, causing officer to fear for his safety. He stopped. The phrase furtive movement was the one that mattered most. He had heard it in training, in union talks, in hallway whispers after a complaint got filed. It was the phrase that turned force into safety. It wrapped bruises in a ribbon labeled reasonable. He hit print. The printer behind him whirred and spat out the report in warm sheets. Derek watched the pages land in the tray, crisp and official, smelling faintly of heated ink. He stood, smoothed his uniform, and carried the report down the hall. The watch commander's office was brighter, more clinical. Lieutenant Henderson sat behind a desk with a folder open in front of him and a laptop angled slightly away. His uniform looked rumpled, like he'd thrown it on in the dark. He didn't look up when Derek entered. Derek placed the report on the desk with a controlled tap. "Here's the narrative," he said. Henderson's eyes stayed on the screen for another beat. Then he lifted his gaze, and it was the look of a man who'd already seen something he couldn't unsee. "Is it accurate?" Henderson asked. Derek's throat tightened. He kept his face neutral. "Yes, sir. 100%. Henderson picked up the report. His eyes moved over the lines with slow precision. When he reached the drifting claim, his jaw flexed once. When he reached furtive movement, he paused. "I just watched the dash camera footage," Henderson said quietly. The room seemed to narrow around Derek's ribs. He forced his shoulders to stay square. "The camera angle is fixed," he said quickly. "It doesn't capture everything. It doesn't see what I see. The audio is crisp," Henderson continued, ignoring the excuse. And the kid sounded polite. Derek felt heat crawl up his neck. "He was being slick," he snapped before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Henderson's eyes lifted again, steady and tired. "You wrote that he was sweating profusely," he said. "In cold rain." Derek's mouth went dry. "Adrenaline," he said. "It happens." Henderson's attention returned to the report. "You wrote he drifted within the lane before you lit him up. I don't see that. Not even once." Derek's fingers curled slightly at his sides. "Visibility was poor," he insisted. "I have trained observation. I saw it." Henderson's eyes didn't soften. "And you're sure about the marijuana?" Derek nodded too fast. "Yes." A beat of silence. The fluorescent light above Henderson's desk hummed with a thin edge, like a wire under tension. Then Henderson reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was warm, as if it had just been fed through a machine. The top edge was slightly curled. Derek's eyes caught the black block letters first, then the timestamp stamped at the top in hard ink. Henderson slid it across the desk. "A preservation order." The words hit Derek's stomach like a fist. The timestamp did the rest. This wasn't morning. This was now. Carter Banks had already laid a legal tripwire across the floor. "He faxed it 5 minutes ago," Henderson said, voice low. "He's not waiting. He's already awake." Derek stared at the paper. The black ink looked too crisp, too confident, like it had been printed from the future. His palms dampened. "We can still search the car," Derek said, desperation slipping into his tone. "K9 at 0600. We'll find something." He ditched it. "It has to be there." Henderson leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "If you search that car and you find nothing," he said, "you don't just lose the case. You become the case." Derek's chest rose with a sharp breath. He tried to swallow. The saliva felt thick. Henderson tapped the preservation order with one finger. The paper made a dry sound against the desk. "From this moment," he said, "you do nothing off book. You do not talk to anyone. Not your buddies, not your wife, not your union yet. You wait for instruction." Derek forced a nod. His mouth wanted to form promises, explanations, anything that could push the moment away. He heard Carter's voice in his memory, flat and guillotine sharp. "Stop talking." Henderson stood and opened the door without ceremony. "Go home," he said. "Try to sleep. K9 hits at 6. And Derek..." Derek paused in the doorway. Henderson's gaze held him, heavy with warning. "You better be right about the weed." Derek walked out into the parking lot. The rain had eased into a mist, hanging low and cold over the asphalt. His truck waited under a dim light, paint beaded with water. He climbed in and shut the door, the interior suddenly too quiet. His body camera wasn't on anymore, but he could still feel the phantom blink of it on his chest. He sat there without starting the engine. The preservation order's timestamp replayed in his mind like a flashing sign. 5 minutes ago, already filed, already trapped. He pulled out his personal phone. The screen lit his face in a pale glow. His thumb scrolled until it stopped on a contact name he hadn't wanted to touch. Danny K9. Derek stared at it, breathing shallow. Outside, the mist clung to the windshield like a film. The truck's cabin smelled faintly of stale cologne and damp fabric. His thumb hovered over the call button. For a moment, he held still, balanced on the edge of a line he'd always sworn he would never cross. Then, the memory of that courtroom silence he could almost hear in advance pressed against his skull. Not laughter, the absence of it. Derek pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, and in the tiny speaker, a groggy voice answered, thick with sleep. "Yo," Danny said. "It's late." Derek's voice came out tight, almost whispering. "I need a solid," he said. "A big one." Dawn arrived in Oak Creek without warmth. The sky was the color of dirty steel, and the air smelled like wet gravel and exhaust. Derek Holbrook stood at the edge of the impound lot with his hands jammed deep into his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. A chain-link fence cut the world into squares, each one filled with damp, silent cars. The Mustang sat near the center of the lot, charcoal paint beaded with moisture, gleaming even under a weak gray sun. In the flat morning light, it didn't look like a threat. It looked like craft. It looked like patience. 3 years of hands and tools turned into something that didn't belong behind a fence. Derek had been there since before the gate opened, pacing grooves into the gravel. His eyes kept darting to the clock on his phone. Each minute felt like a nail sliding deeper. Headlights swept across the lot. A white K9 unit van rolled in, tires crunching slow. It stopped with a soft hiss of brakes. The side door opened, and Danny Russo climbed out, pulling his collar up against the wind. He avoided Derek's eyes the way people avoided wreckage on the shoulder of the road. A Belgian Malinois jumped down after him, lean and alert, ears up, nose already working. The dog's paws slapped the wet ground and left dark prints. "Let's get this over with," Danny said. His voice was rough with lack of sleep. Derek tried to sound steady. "Just do a thorough sweep," he said. "Under the seats, vents, seams, maybe a seed, a stem, anything." Danny's jaw tightened. He clipped the lead on the dog and walked toward the Mustang without responding. The dog's nails clicked lightly on the gravel as if the lot itself had teeth. Up close, the Mustang smelled clean. Leather conditioner, a faint metallic tang from old engine parts, and the cold mineral scent of rain. No sour smoke, no skunky edge. Derek's stomach tightened anyway. Danny let the dog circle first. The Malinois sniffed the tires, the bumper, the door seams. Its tail wagged once, casual, then settled. The dog's nose moved like a scanner, fast, efficient. Nothing in its posture shifted toward an alert. Derek swallowed. "Open it," Danny said. Derek fished the master key from his pocket and unlocked the driver's door. The latch clicked cleanly. When he pulled the door open, a smooth breath of treated leather slid out, warm despite the cold morning, as if the car held onto its own climate. Danny guided the dog into the front seat. "Seek," he said, low and firm. "Seek." The dog sniffed the floor mats, nose dipping, rising, dipping again. It pushed into the center console gap. It jumped into the back seat, claws ticking dangerously close to the upholstery. Derek flinched, imagining the scrape of nails turning into a lawsuit. He forced himself to stay still. Minutes crawled. The only sounds were wind through the fence, distant traffic, and the soft snuffling of the dog's breath. Danny crouched, watching the dog with the blank focus of someone who had done this thousands of times. Derek watched the same way, but his focus was hunger. The dog shoved its nose into the glove box. It pressed along the seams where the seat met the frame. It paused near the passenger side, sniffed once, then moved on. No stiffening, no sit, no paw scratch, no head snap. It hopped out of the car, sat on the gravel, and scratched behind its ear, eyes lifting to Danny like it was waiting for a treat. Derek's throat tightened. He didn't alert, he said, the words sounding wrong as soon as they left his mouth. He didn't sit. Why didn't he sit? Danny stood, pulling the lead gently. Because there's nothing there, he said. Not unkind, just final. Buster can smell a gram inside a gas tank. This car is clean, cleaner than my church shoes. The sentence hit Derek like a shove. He felt heat surge behind his eyes. Check again, he snapped. The desperation made his voice sharper than he intended. Maybe the vents, maybe the trunk. Do it again. Danny's gaze finally met his. The look was tired and edged with warning. No, Danny said. I'm not playing games. The report goes in as negative. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice as if volume could turn reality. Danny, he tried. You know what's at stake. Danny's mouth tightened. I know exactly what's at stake, he said. That's why I'm not touching it. Not with banks involved. Not with everybody watching. He guided the dog back toward the van. The Malinois trotted willingly, tail swishing, unaware it had just decided a man's future. Danny opened the side door, helped the dog in, and shut it with a solid clunk. Derek stood by the open Mustang door, staring at the empty seat where the dog had just been. The leather looked untouched. Too clean. Too honest. You're on your own, Danny said from the driver's side of the van. He climbed in without waiting for a reply. The van pulled away, tires crunching over gravel, leaving a thin ribbon of damp dust that settled quickly. The sound faded down the lane until there was only wind and the distant whisper of highway tires. Derek closed the Mustang door. The latch clicked like a small verdict. He stared at the car through the fence squares, breathing shallow. The physical evidence he had been counting on, the last thing he thought could validate him, had evaporated into air and rain. All that remained was his report, his word, and the videos Carter had already locked down. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't pull it out. The vibration felt like a pulse that didn't belong to him anymore. Derek turned away from the Mustang and walked along the fence line, boots sinking slightly into wet gravel. He tried to rehearse what he would say to Henderson, to the union, to anyone who would listen. The words came apart in his mouth before he could form them. Clean, negative, no alert. Each phrase sounded like a door closing. He reached the gate and stopped, gripping the cold metal until his knuckles whitened. His breath fogged in front of his face. In that fog, he saw his own reflection in the fence, wire blurred, trapped, and smaller than he remembered being. Behind him, the Mustang sat still, gleaming, untouched. Ahead of him, the day waited with the kind of brightness that didn't forgive anything. Courtroom 4 had never held this many bodies without smelling like sweat and impatience. That morning it felt like a sealed container full of pressed suits, damp coats, and murmured anticipation. The wooden benches creaked under shifting weight. A wall clock over the door cut time into audible slices, each tick too sharp for the quiet. Jordan Banks sat at the defense table in a Navy suit that made him look older until his fingers flexed and gave him away. His wrists still carried faint discoloration under the cuffs of his shirt, shadows of a tight metal bite. He kept his hands folded on the tabletop, knuckles relaxed, gaze forward. He did not look at the gallery. Carter Banks sat beside him, perfectly still. A legal pad lay open, but his pen didn't move. He didn't need to fill space with notes. The file in front of him looked thin, but the calm in his posture suggested it weighed a ton. Across the aisle, Derek Holbrook sat at the prosecution table in his dress uniform, shaved head gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Medals lined his chest like armor. His posture tried for proud, but his right leg bounced under the table in a fast, betraying rhythm. Every so often he tugged at his collar as if the fabric were tightening on its own. The prosecutor, a young man with a narrow tie and a tense jaw, leaned close to Derek and whispered. Derek didn't respond. His eyes stayed on Carter, as if staring hard enough could turn the man into a rumor instead of a threat. A clerk called the room to order. Chairs scraped. The murmur collapsed into silence. Judge Holloway entered and took her seat with efficient, controlled weight. Her eyes swept the room once, not curious, not impressed, just assessing. The gavel struck. The sound was flat and final. "This court is now in session," she said, her voice carried without strain. "We are here for the preliminary evidentiary hearing in the matter of the state versus Jordan Banks. Defense has moved to suppress evidence and dismiss charges based on an unlawful stop and arrest." Carter stood. He didn't move to the podium. He stepped into the open space between tables, buttoned his jacket with one smooth motion, and faced the bench as if he owned the air in front of it. He spoke without flourish. "Your Honor," he said, "the defense calls Officer Derek Holbrook to the stand." A ripple moved through the gallery, quick and contained. Several uniformed officers in the back stiffened. A reporter lowered a phone, eyes widening, then raised it again like instinct. Derek's jaw tightened. He stood, chair legs scraping, and walked to the witness stand with controlled strides. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore, and sat. The wooden chair creaked under his weight. His fingers gripped the armrests, knuckles paling. Carter approached the witness stand at a measured pace and stopped at a respectful distance. Up close, Derek could smell Carter's cologne, subtle, expensive, and the faint scent of rain lingering on wool. Carter's face held a polite smile, soft enough to appear friendly and sharp enough to cut. "Officer Holbrook," Carter began, voice smooth, almost warm, "thank you for your service to our community." Derek blinked, momentarily thrown by the tone. "Thank you," he said. Carter's smile didn't change. "Let's walk through the night of November 14th. You stated in your report that you observed my son's vehicle drifting within its lane prior to initiating the stop." "Correct." "Yes," Derek said, settling into his rehearsed cadence. "He touched the lane divider twice. And the weather conditions." "Heavy rain," Derek replied. "Visibility was reduced." Carter nodded once, as if agreeing with a trivial point. "Where were you positioned when you observed this drifting?" "In the median," Derek said. "How far away were you when you saw it?" Derek hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the prosecutor table for a fraction of a second, then back. "About 200 yards. A murmur in the back, quickly suppressed. Carter's eyebrows lifted slightly. 200 yards, he repeated, letting the distance sit in the room. Through heavy rain, in the dark. Derek shifted in the chair. The wood creaked again. "I have trained observation skills," he said. "I saw what I saw." "Of course," Carter said, the words gentle and dismissive at the same time. He turned a page on his legal pad without writing anything. "Now, when you approached the vehicle, you claimed you detected a strong odor of burnt marijuana emanating from the cabin." "Yes," Derek said. His voice grew firmer, grateful for familiar ground. "It hit me immediately when the window rolled down. It was distinct." "Distinct," Carter echoed, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Strong enough to overcome the smell of rain. Strong enough to overcome exhaust on a 50-year-old engine." Derek nodded too quickly again. "Yes." Carter walked back to the defense table, picked up a single sheet of paper, and returned to the witness stand. The paper crackled softly as he held it. "Officer," he said, "are you aware that a canine sweep of the vehicle yielded 0 results?" Derek's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "Dogs aren't perfect." Carter's gaze stayed steady. "Are you aware that a toxicology screen performed on Jordan Banks 1 hour after release was negative for all substances?" Derek blinked. A bead of sweat formed at his hairline. "I wasn't aware," he stammered. "Drugs metabolize. Or he could have been around someone." "In a car," Carter cut in, voice still smooth. "Driving alone." Derek's lips pressed together. His leg bounced faster under the stand, a rhythm he couldn't stop. Carter set the paper down and picked up another, heavier sheet from his stack. "Let's talk about the next phrase in your report," he said. "You wrote that the driver made a furtive movement toward the center console, causing you to fear for your safety. That is why you removed him from the car using force." "Yes," Derek said, trying to regain ground. He reached down. "I didn't know if he was grabbing a gun." "A gun," Carter repeated, turning slightly toward the judge, as if inviting her to taste the word. He faced Derek again. "Your Honor," Carter said, "the defense would like to introduce Exhibit A, the dash camera footage, and Exhibit B, the body camera footage." The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Objection," he said. "We haven't stipulated to the body cam audio." Carter didn't look at him. "It is the officer's own recording," he said. "It speaks for itself." Judge Holloway's eyes cut to the prosecutor, then back to Carter. "Overruled," she said. "Play the tape." A technician at the side table clicked a remote. The courtroom screen flickered and came alive. Static hissed for a breath. Then the sound of rain filled the room, louder than anyone expected, a steady white noise that made the silence feel thin. Derek watched his own headlights wash the Mustang in blue and red on the screen. He felt the room leaning forward as one organism. Carter didn't look at the screen yet. He watched Derek instead, waiting for the moment his witness would realize the camera was not a suggestion. The video rolled, and the rain on the speakers sounded like 1,000 fingers tapping on glass. Carter's voice cut through it, low and precise. "Officer Holbrook," he said, "keep watching." The screen's glow washed over the courtroom, turning faces into pale masks. Rain hissed through the speakers, a constant shh that made every other sound feel invasive. The footage showed the Mustang settling onto the shoulder beneath a street lamp, its paint reflecting red and blue like bruised metal. Carter stepped closer to the screen controls without touching them, as if proximity alone could command the room. His eyes stayed on Derek. "Pause," Carter said. The technician froze the frame. Jordan sat behind the wheel, hands visible at 10 and 2, shoulders squared. A timestamp glowed in the corner of the video, clean and indifferent. Carter turned slightly, pointing with 2 fingers. Not dramatic, just precise. "Officer Holbrook," he said. "Where are his hands?" Derek's mouth opened. No sound came out at first. "On the wheel," he managed, voice rough. Carter nodded once. "Play." The video resumed. Jordan's voice came through the speakers, polite and clear. It sounded worse in a courtroom than it ever could on the side of a highway because it sounded reasonable. Carter watched Derek's jaw tighten as the tape showed a slow reach. A wallet, an ID offered. No sudden motion, no threat, just compliance. Carter lifted a hand. "Stop." The frame froze again, this time at the moment Derek ordered Jordan out. Jordan's fingers were at the seatbelt release, the red button bright against the dark interior. It was ordinary. It was unmistakable. Carter's tone didn't rise. It sharpened. "This," he said, "is the movement you described as furtive." Derek shifted in the witness chair. The wood creaked, loud in the hush. "In the heat of the moment," he began, sweat brightening his forehead. "It looked like a seatbelt," Carter said, cutting through him like a blade sliding into a seam. "He is unbuckling a seatbelt." The courtroom held its breath. A reporter's keys stopped clicking for a beat, then resumed faster. Carter let the video run. The screen showed Derek's hands on Jordan, the shove into paint, the aggressive pat down. The sound of rain flattened everything until Jordan's voice rose through it, trembling but firm. Then it arrived, clean as a bullet. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." The words hung for a fraction of a second, then Derek's laugh broke through the speakers. It wasn't just a laugh. It was wet and ugly and dismissive, a sound that made people in the gallery shift as if it had touched them. It echoed off courtroom walls that were built for truth, not swagger. Carter didn't stop the clip. He let it keep going. 2 seconds, 3. Long enough for the laughter to become uncomfortable, long enough for the room to realize it wasn't a reaction. It was a statement. Then Carter lifted his hand slowly. Pause. The sound cut off mid-breath. Silence rushed in like a tide. In that silence, the wall clock became cruel. Tick, tick, tick. Derek's breathing was suddenly audible, shallow and uneven. Judge Holloway's face had changed. Her mouth was set in a tight line, and her eyes were fixed on Derek as if she were seeing him for the first time. Carter turned back to the witness stand and stepped closer, close enough that Derek could see the faint reflection of the frozen frame in Carter's eyes. "Officer Holbrook," Carter said, voice low, almost gentle. "When you laughed, what was the joke?" Derek swallowed. His Adam's apple jumped. "I wasn't laughing at him," he said, and the words came out too fast. "It was stress, a nervous reaction." Carter's head tilted slightly. "A nervous reaction?" he repeated. He lifted a sheet of paper from his stack, a transcript printed in tight black lines, and held it where Derek could see the highlighted sentence. "You said, 'You don't have rights. You have me.'" Derek's lips parted. His leg bounced under the stand, faster now, uncontrollable. "I didn't mean it like that." Carter's voice hardened, the warmth evaporating. How did you mean it? Derek blinked. Sweat slid down his temple. He tried to smile and failed. He was being a smartass, he said. He was lecturing me on the side of the highway. So you punished him, Carter snapped, and the change in tone was like a switchblade opening. You didn't like his tone, so you invented a smell. You didn't like his intelligence, so you invented a threat. You arrested a 17-year-old because he bruised your ego. That's not true, Derek blurted, voice cracking. I smelled marijuana. Carter didn't argue. He turned away from Derek and reached down to his table. When he stood again, he held a folder in his hand, plain and worn at the edges, the kind of file that had been handled by too many careful hands. He raised it just enough for Derek to see the label. Internal Affairs Investigation. Subject: Officer Derek Holbrook. Derek's face lost color. The metals on his chest seemed suddenly heavy, like someone had poured lead into them. His eyes locked onto the folder as if it were a weapon pointed at him. Carter's voice dropped, calm again, more dangerous for it. Officer Holbrook, he said, you seem very confident in your instincts. Tell me, does the name Anthony Cole ring a bell? The prosecutor shot up. His chair legs scraped hard. Objection, he said, too loud. Relevance. Prior bad acts. Inadmissible. Carter didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the judge. Your Honor, he said, and now his voice filled the room without needing volume. This goes to credibility. This goes to pattern and practice. This officer has a documented history of fabricating charges to justify excessive force. The gallery stirred. A uniformed officer in the back shifted as if the bench had become hot. Reporters leaned in, pens moving faster. The tension in the room thickened until it felt like you could press a thumb into it. Judge Holloway's gavel struck. The sound cracked through the noise like a warning shot. Order, she said. Order in this court. Counsel, approach. Carter stepped to the bench without hurry, folder in hand. The prosecutor followed, shoulders tight. Derek sat frozen on the witness stand, staring at the file as if it were a mirror showing him a future he didn't want to see. The bench conference was hushed, but violent in its intensity. Judge Holloway's eyes scanned the folder pages as Carter angled them toward her. Her face hardened with each line, as if anger were being written onto her features. Derek watched the judge's expression change, watched the prosecutor's mouth go dry, watched the courtroom screen still frozen on his own laughter. In that moment, Derek understood something that no training video had ever taught him. His report was not the story anymore. The tape was. The judge straightened, gaze sharp. She ended the bench conference with one curt motion of her hand. Carter returned to his position with the folder still in his grip, calm as a man holding a key. The prosecutor looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Judge Holloway's eyes cut to Derek. Officer Holbrook, she said, voice flat and dangerous. Remain seated. Derek's fingers tightened around the armrests until the wood creaked again. He stared at the frozen frame of his own face on the screen, mouth open mid-laugh, and felt the floor tilt beneath the life he thought he controlled. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The air in the room had already turned brittle. Judge Holloway looked down at the prosecutor with an expression that felt like a door locking. Mr. Sterling, she said, you are prosecuting a minor on charges rooted in an alleged odor, contradicted by a negative search, and an officer's narrative that is not supported by video. The prosecutor's lips parted. No sound came out at first. His hands gripped the edge of his table as if it might keep him upright. Judge Holloway's gaze shifted to Derek. Officer Holbrook, she said, you will answer only the questions asked. You will not editorialize. Derek's mouth was dry. His tongue felt too large. He nodded once, quick, too eager. Carter stood in the well of the court again, posture relaxed, voice controlled. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. The calm was worse than a grin. Your Honor, Carter said, given the footage and the state's lack of corroborating evidence, the defense renews its motion to dismiss with prejudice. A murmur rippled through the gallery and was crushed by another gavel strike. Judge Holloway turned back to the prosecutor. Mr. Sterling, she said, you have 30 seconds to make an intelligent decision. Sterling's eyes flicked toward Derek. Derek stared back, helpless, metals gleaming uselessly. Sterling's jaw tightened. He looked down at his notes, then at the frozen frame on the screen where Derek's mouth was still open mid-laugh, the timestamp burning in the corner like a brand. Sterling stood, shoulders stiff. When he spoke, his voice sounded smaller than it should have. "Your Honor," he said, "the state moves to dismiss all charges against Jordan Banks." The words hit Derek like a punch to the sternum. The room seemed to sway. He reached for anger, for outrage, for anything that could restore the shape of power. Nothing came. His hands tightened on the armrests until the wood creaked under strain. Judge Holloway didn't soften. "In the interest of justice," she said, and her gavel struck again, sharp and final, dismissed with prejudice. The clerk's pen scratched. A camera shutter clicked in the gallery. Someone exhaled too loud. Judge Holloway's eyes locked on Derek. "Officer Holbrook," she said, "step down. Do not leave this building." Derek stood because his legs moved, not because he chose to. The witness chair groaned as he rose. His knees felt loose, as if his joints had been replaced with water. He walked down from the stand, head buzzing, ears ringing with the memory of his own laughter played through courtroom speakers. He passed the defense table and tried to keep his face neutral. His skin felt tight. His mouth tasted metallic. Carter stood as Derek came level with him. He leaned in slightly, close enough that only Derek could hear, close enough that Derek caught the faint scent of rain and paper. "You laughed at my son because you thought he was powerless," Carter said, voice low like stones grinding. "Do you know the difference between you and me, Holbrook?" Derek didn't answer. He couldn't. "I don't need a badge to be powerful," Carter continued. "I just need the truth." Carter leaned back. His face showed no triumph, only certainty. Derek kept walking, refusing to let his feet speed up, refusing to let the room see him run. The courthouse hallway hit him with a different smell. Old stone, carpet shampoo, and breath held too long. The lighting was softer, but it didn't feel kinder. It felt like the calm corridor outside an operating room. He made it 10 steps before he saw Captain Henderson waiting near a set of double doors. Henderson didn't look angry. He looked exhausted, like he'd been carrying a weight all morning and had finally decided where to set it down. Derek tried to force a smile. "Captain," he said, voice thin, "rough day in there. That lawyer—" "Badge and gun," Henderson said. The words were quiet, but they landed like a hammer. Derek blinked as if he hadn't heard correctly. "What?" Henderson held out his hand again, palm up. It was not a request. It was an endpoint. "You're suspended pending termination," Henderson said. "Carter Banks filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the department, the city, and you personally. The mayor wants distance. Fast." Derek's chest tightened. "It's just a dismissal," he protested, the logic desperate. "We can fight this internally. The union—" "Badge and gun," Henderson repeated, sharper now. "Right now." Derek's hand hovered near his holster, trembling slightly. His fingers felt clumsy, like they belonged to someone else. For a second, he considered refusing, just to feel control one more time. Then he saw a deputy in the corner shift his weight and rest a hand near his own belt. Derek understood the hierarchy had already changed. Slowly, Derek unfastened his duty belt. The leather creaked softly. He drew his service weapon, careful to keep the muzzle down, and held it out grip first. Henderson took it without ceremony. Derek reached to his chest. His fingertips found the pin back of the badge. For a moment he hesitated, feeling the metal's weight through fabric, remembering the first day he'd clipped it on and the way his father had looked at him like he mattered. He pulled it free. The badge came away with a faint scrape. He placed it in Henderson's waiting hand. It didn't land quietly. A short, dry clink rang out as metal touched the hard surface of Henderson's clipboard. The sound was small, but in that hallway it echoed like a lid closing. Derek stared at the badge for a beat, now separated from him, just an object. The numbers meant nothing without the man behind them, and the man behind them felt suddenly exposed. Henderson didn't look at the badge. He looked at Derek. "Don't contact anyone," he said. "Don't make this worse. Go home." Derek's mouth moved, searching for words that might rewind time. None arrived. Down the corridor, the courtroom doors opened and a wave of sound spilled out, reporters calling, people murmuring, shoes scuffing. Jordan Banks stepped into the hallway with Carter beside him. Jordan's suit sat clean on his shoulders, but his eyes carried the weight of the last days. Jordan stopped near the top of the steps leading outside. He looked back through the glass lobby doors. Derek stood inside the building now without his weapon, without his badge, without the weight that had made him feel larger. The glass reflected him into a faint silhouette, smaller than he remembered being. His medals looked like decoration on a costume. Jordan's gaze lingered on him for a second. Not hateful, not victorious, just observing. Outside, sunlight hit wet pavement and made it shine. Jordan turned away, Carter's hand settling briefly on his shoulder as they walked toward the exit. Derek stayed where he was, hearing the clink again in his mind, hearing it repeat until it stopped sounding like metal and started sounding like an ending. Outside the courthouse, the air felt scrubbed clean by recent rain, but the pavement still held a wet shine that caught the sun in hard flashes. The crowd on the steps shifted like a restless flock, reporters angling for faces, phones raised, microphones bobbing. The noise rose and fell in uneven waves. Jordan kept moving. He stayed close to Carter, shoulder to shoulder, letting his father's presence form a narrow corridor through the chaos. Carter didn't push anyone. He didn't need to. People stepped aside on instinct, making space the way they did for something heavy moving downhill. At the bottom of the steps, Jordan paused. He turned his head back once, eyes finding the glass entrance behind them. Through the reflection and glare, Derek Holbrook stood inside the lobby. Without the badge, without the gun, he looked like a man who had misplaced his name. The sunlight turned the glass into a mirror. Derek's silhouette floated in it, trapped between his own reflection and the building's shadow. Jordan's expression didn't harden. It didn't soften. It simply settled into something quiet and final. Carter followed Jordan's gaze for half a second, then guided him toward the black Range Rover waiting at the curb. The door opened with a soft mechanical click. The interior smelled like clean leather and cold air, a different kind of confinement. Jordan slid into the passenger seat and shut the door. The sound muted the world outside, cutting off the crowd as if someone had turned down a volume knob. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers slightly curled. He looked out through the windshield at the bright street ahead, blinking once, slow. Carter got in and closed his door. He didn't start the engine immediately. He sat with both hands on the wheel, shoulders still, breathing controlled. The silence inside the vehicle felt deliberate, not empty. It made room for the body to remember. Jordan's throat moved as he swallowed. His eyes drifted down to his wrists. The faint bruising was still there beneath his cuffs, a dull color that didn't match the polished courtroom outcome. He flexed his fingers once, feeling the skin tighten. Carter noticed. His jaw tightened, the muscles near his cheek shifting like a restrained bite. "You did what you were supposed to do," Carter said quietly. Jordan's lips parted, then closed. When he spoke, his voice sounded younger than it had in court. "It didn't matter," he said, barely above a whisper. Nothing I did mattered to him. Carter's hands tightened on the wheel until the leather creaked softly. He stared straight ahead, not at the courthouse, not at the road, but at something further back in time. "I know," he said. The words came out heavy, not comforting, just true. "That's the part that stays." Jordan's breath hitched once, small and involuntary. He blinked again. His eyes shone, but he didn't let the tears fall. He turned his head toward Carter, the movement slow, controlled, as if he didn't want to startle himself. "He laughed," Jordan said. The sentence landed like a bruise being pressed. In his face, it was easy. Carter's gaze flicked to him. For a moment, the cold courtroom precision was gone, replaced by something sharper and older, protectiveness that didn't need words. "He laughed because he thought the badge made him untouchable," Carter said. "He thought the rules were decorations." Jordan stared at the glove compartment, unfocused. And now the rules are what he has," Carter replied. "Paper, video, timestamps, people who don't owe him fear." Outside, someone shouted Carter's name. A microphone tapped lightly against the Range Rover's window, a dull thud. Carter didn't look toward it. Jordan shifted in his seat, shoulders rising and falling with a slow breath. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last days seemed to drain all at once, leaving behind a chill that settled deep. Carter reached into the center console and pulled out a small notepad and a pen. The paper was clean, crisp. He held it out without ceremony. "Write it down," he said. Jordan took the pad, the pen sliding between his fingers. "Now, tonight," Carter said, and his voice sharpened with urgency. "While it's raw, every word, the order, the tone, where he stood, what he touched, what you smelled on his breath, what you heard in the car. Details are not drama, they are leverage." Jordan stared at the blank page. His hand trembled slightly as he placed the pen tip down, then lifted it, then placed it again. Carter's eyes stayed on him, steady and present. "Trauma edits memory," he said. "The body keeps what the mind tries to soften. Don't let it." Jordan nodded once, small. The silence returned. But now, it had a purpose. It felt like a room being cleared for work. Carter finally started the engine. It came to life with a smooth, controlled hum that sounded nothing like the Mustang's growl. The Range Rover eased away from the curb, tires whispering over wet asphalt. The courthouse slipped past in the side mirror, shrinking into a bright rectangle of glass and stone. Jordan kept looking forward, but his fingers tightened around the pen. Inside the courthouse, beyond the lobby glass, the world continued without ceremony. Forms would be filed, calls would be made, a case number would be assigned to a lawsuit. A department would begin to calculate the cost of one man's arrogance. Jordan pressed the pen to paper and began to write. The first lines came slow, then faster, the words forming as if they had been waiting for permission. His handwriting wasn't shaky, it was precise. Carter drove in silence beside him, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the console, close enough to be a reminder. The sun struck the wet road ahead and turned it into a bright, unforgiving ribbon. In that light, there was no place for a laugh to hide. No one was laughing now. A file number would.